Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. So right now you're viewing part 2 in a series about modeling and reanimating the wholesome Minecraft parrot meme. So if you haven't seen part 1, you're missing out on how to model this. And in this video we're going to focus on rigging this up to animate in Solidworks. So if you want to check out part 1, the card's going to be up here right now. But otherwise, we'll hop right into it. So in front of us here we have the parrot, and it's in a multi-body part. Alright, so as some of you may know, there is no dynamic motions in a SolidWorks part file, but there is in an assembly file. So the first step is that I'm going to change this from a part file to an assembly file. And the way we're going to do this is with the save bodies command. So I'm just going to search for it up here. You can see I already have it partially typed out. And you can just hit save bodies. And from here, I'm going to click on this little disk, which will say select all. I can change any one of these names if I want to by double clicking, but that's fine for me. But what is going to be important here is that I'm going to check on propagate visual properties. And basically that's the information of the color. So if I leave that unchecked, it's all going to come in gray, and then we have to reapply all the colors, and I'd rather not do that. But I'm going to go here to where it says create assembly. And all you have to do to tell SolidWorks that you want an assembly is just hit this browse button and give it a place to live, pretty much. So I'll just give it a file name of ASM. If you're using a PDM system, you'll probably want a more specific name than that, but I'll be fine here. And I think that should be it. So I'll just hit OK and let that turn. Alright, and the operation completed, and you can tell because now we have a save bodies feature down here. But we're still looking at the part file, so where's the assembly? Well, it created the assembly and then immediately closed it because it just assumed that it wanted it out of your way. But since we want this open, a quick way of getting it back is that you can actually just go to File and open Recent, and since it opened it up, it actually counts as a recent document. So it should be the first thing in there. Yeah, and there's our parrot with all the colors. And again, the standard template is just very dark. So I'll just go to the beach ball, light, scene, and camera. Go to lights. Whoops, not off. I meant edit light. And I like to turn this all the way up to 0.7. And that's looking pretty swell again. I'll hit save. So at this point, everything is fixed in place. But before we start floating everything and moving everything willy-nilly, I'm going to group some of these such that, we want to animate the head as one unit. We want to animate the body as one unit. So I'm going to start reorganizing this into separate sub-assemblies. And if you've never done it before, it's actually pretty easy. So I want the head as one piece, so I'll just look at it from the side here, this side profile. See if I can draw a box to select all the stuff of the head. There we go. So I selected all of that. Selected a whole bunch of stuff in my tree. I can right click on one of those items in the tree and say form new subassembly. And it's that easy. Keep in mind that when you do this, it turns into under defined. So for right now, I'm just gonna hit fixed so it doesn't move anywhere. And I can actually rename this. If I click and hit F2 and just name it to head. There we go. That'll do. And now for the body, that should be all this stuff. So if I can grab that. I want to exclude the feet. There we go. That'll do. And I will say form new subassembly. Rename body. So we can just keep track of this. And the last two things will be the feet. And actually, let me fix. The 2 feet will come to whoops, make sure I just have the feet selected. The 2 feet and the last 2 items will be in a new subassembly. Feet. Alright, now in the tree we have everything nice and organized that we can start rigging stuff up, and we don't have to dig through a bunch of stuff. Alright, so the plan to rig this up, I'm going to use a couple of SolidWorks mates. But before anything, I'm going to define a couple of axes, one being on the top here, so it's going to be the axis where the parrot can tilt its head, and another axis here where the entire body can rotate around the feet in a circular fashion. So I'm going to go to the body subassembly on the left here and say open the subassembly. Alright, it's dark here, but that's fine because I'm just going to put some reference geometry. And the first of which, I'll just sketch on this top face. So you might get a warning that says, hey, you've started this sketch within the assembly rather than apart. That is totally fine. We just need a line to help define our mates. So just kind of drawing a straight line on the face from there to there. That should work out really well for us. And I'll get out of that. And start another sketch here. Another line from here to here. Make sure it is centered and going through the origin. Bridging across the midpoints will do, just like I have. And there we go. If we go back into the regular assembly, you'll see those two items show up. Alright, I'm gonna go to the feet, kind of do the same thing. So we'll just sketch up here. And I'll start at the origin and just go vertical like that. There, you can leave it like that. Go back over here. You see it appears. And we need one for the head. So going to the head. Yeah, remember, so the head is actually inset a little bit. And that's because when it rotates, you know, you don't want to show a sharp edge. You know, you always want the head to be connected to the body. So in order to get it to connect properly, I'm going to get a plane from reference geometry here and say that is 0.5 inches inset like that. And then I will sketch on plane 1. Just get ourselves a line like that. Yeah, and eventually these lines are going to be hidden, but we do need something to help define where we need to go. So yeah, you see these two things line up perfectly. Alright, so now we can start rigging stuff up, but before we can add mates, it's all fixed. Remember, I fixed it as soon as I made it into a sub-assembly. So here's now where I'm gonna lift that. So I'm gonna go right click and say float. And now I can say this line and this line, just holding down control and selecting both of them, I can say that they are coincident with each other. If I try and move the head around, okay, so it's got the bobbing motion, alright, but, well, that's not supposed to happen. And so, the way I'll fix this is because this all came from the same part file, I can actually use the standard planes from the sub-assembly. So if I say the front plane and the head assembly and the front plane of the main assembly to be coincident to each other, it actually moves it perfectly in place. And that is the 1 degree of freedom. So it took 2 mates to get to the degree of freedom that we need. But eventually we'll need one more in order to rig this up with mate controller. And it's going to be an angle mate of the right plane of the head with the right plane of the main assembly. And that's going to tell Solidworks what angle the head is at any given moment. So I'll go to right plane and go over here and say angle, and I'll put 0, which seems redundant. So why wouldn't you just use coincident? And that's where mate controller will come in a little bit. Mate controller can only change the numbers of mates. It can't change a coincident into an angle mate. If it starts an angle mate, it's an angle mate forever. But we get around this by just placing 0, so it's an angle mate that is acting like a coincident mate, if that makes any sense. So that's looking good. I'll go ahead and save that. Now, I'll just hit save internally, that's fine. Alright, and now for the body. Oh, the body. So there's a couple things going on here. So I'll start by floating the body away. So now this should be able to move around. So in order to get it from stop sliding back and forth like that, it'll be the front plane of the body with the front plane of the main assembly, say coincident. And now that should all be sliding along a plane. And to get it to do the proper motion, I'm going to say the right plane of the body with the right plane of the main assembly will be parallel, not coincident. We just want it to be upright as he grooves like that, and not tilt all over the place. And now here comes a tricky part. So how do we tell Solidworks that we want these two lines to be a specific distance from each other and be able to control this with an angle mate such that, you know, I can just specify it to go in a circle like this? It's kind of tricky. So we'll do that with a virtual part that's going to act like a cam of sorts. If you don't follow what I'm saying, that's okay. Hopefully when you see it, it'll make a little bit more sense. But what I'll go ahead and do is go to this insert components and I'll say make a new part. And at this point, it looks like nothing happened, but if I float out here, you'll see I have my cursor with a little check, and it's just saying, where do you want to place this component? For right now, I'll just place it on the front plane of the entire assembly. And then everything goes wireframe because it assumes you're going to start drawing geometry and make a new part. But at this point, we're just going to immediately exit, so exit the sketch, and then exit the new part. So this is a little bit advanced, but if you want to know more about these techniques, this is called top-down assembly modeling. But for right now, we're just going to get out of the part as well. Like that. So whenever you create these what's called virtual parts, you get this in-place mate. And this in-place mate is going to have to be suppressed because we're going to actually add our own mates that will describe its motion. And let me show the planes of this virtual part so we can actually see where it is. Since there's no geometry in it, we won't be able to see it. So yeah, there's our quote-unquote invisible part. So first I'll start by saying make the front plane of this and the front plane of that coincident, so it doesn't want to slide back. And actually I might have to go to my eyeball here and say to show planes to me. Yep, there we go. And then what I'll say, well, I do want the top of the feet here to be the center of rotation, so let me just move this out of here for a second. Alright, so I want this to be the center of rotation. So I'll pick this plane, this top plane, and this line, and I'll say make coincident. And then I'll do the same thing for the right plane. Oops, so right plane and this line, coincident. And that should just leave one more degree of freedom. And that is, if I get this right plane of this and the right plane of that and say make an angle with each other, and just to test this, I'll just put 45 in there. It should turn. Yes, so this is working correctly. This is good. But let me just go and edit this real quick. And I'll set that to 0. There we go. So now we have this little invisible cam that can rotate stuff around. And now here's the trick. I'll take this line of the body and this right plane and say be coincident with each other. And what this does is it forces this line to stick to this plane. So when this starts rotating around, so just put 45 there again. There you go. Stuff starts to move. But we're still missing a dimension, and that is the distance of here, from here to here. Whoops, come back. So in order to fix that, I'll select this axis here and this axis here. And I'll say, make that a specific distance from each other. And that will be 0.5. If I hit OK, and now if I try and move this around, so let me try 45, it scoots over like that. If I try 135, it goes like that. There we go. It's processing 225. It just goes straight to the solution. But hopefully when we animate this, this will be totally fine. So go ahead and hit OK. And this is all rigged up. In order to quickly hide all the geometry away, I'll just click on the eyeball itself here, say hide all types. And we should be ready to rock, except these feet are a little too short, so I might edit that actually. So we go open part, and then I'll go here, edit in context. Should bring me back to the original part file, and this is the extrude thin. And let me make that distance longer. So what if I make that 1.5? This parrot's gonna have long legs. So rebuild. And I actually need to fix the other dimension as well. Oh, the 2 inches should not be from there to there. That was my mistake. It should be from here to here. 2. Or suppose 1.5, since we do have the little offset. There we go. Now if I exit, everything should rebuild. And now these legs should be long enough that no matter where the parrot is in our cycle, I want to go back to the assembly. Do we want to rebuild? We sure do. Oh, and we actually need to move that axis in here. So if I go to the feet assembly, open subassembly, that's fine. And then, is this plane? Question, is this plane 1.5 inches? Because if so, that'd be convenient. Yep, there we go. So in order to fix the location of this axis, I'm gonna right click on the sketch where the line is, edit sketch plane, and move that to the top plane of the assembly, and that should update. There it goes. Do we want to rebuild? We sure do. There we go. And that is looking swell. So there was a little mini lesson in how to implement changes. But at this point, let's go ahead and save. And so to animate this stuff, I'm going to use the mate controller. And it should be under Insert Mate Controller. So Mate Controller was added in SolidWorks 2016, and that's why I say you have to use 2016 or above. You could also traditionally model it using a motion study, and we'll actually be using that to kind of tweak the animation. But, I find that Mate Controller is one of those underrated features that no one really talks about. It's really great if you just want a simple animation. And speaking of underrated features, I did a video about that on SolidWorks 2020, so feel free to check that out. There should be a card coming up. But at any rate, let's add a Mate Controller. And I'll just hit this lightning paperclip to collect all supported mates. And I don't need this distance one, but angle 1 and angle 2. So angle 1 should control the position of the head, and angle 2 is the position of the body. So let's start working on it. Position 1, I'm actually going to start with the head tilted the I could start it tilted the other way, or I could just do like a regular bob. Yeah, I'll just kind of do a regular sideways bob. Now you can adjust this any way you want. Yeah, I'll just leave both of these things at 0, and I'll hit this to add a position, say position 2. And for angle 1, I'll say that is 11 1/8 degree. And angle 2 will be 90. So saying that by the time it gets to position 2, these two things should have moved into place. It looks good, so I'll say add position. Position 3, the head will go all the way to 22.5 degrees like that. And angle 2 will proceed to 180. So it should be at the bottom. And add another position, position 4. This will go back to 11 1/8 degree. While this proceeds to 207, not 170, but 270. Should be all the way around like that. And I believe one more position should do it. So I'm going to change this back to 0. And this, I'm going to try 360. If that gets angry at me, I might try 359 or something like that. Sometimes it can be a little finicky here. But I think that should be it. So we have these 4 changes, total of 5 positions. Let me hit calculate and see what that looks like. Okay, so it looks like it needs a little bit of fixing to do. I might need an additional, let's see, position 5. Yeah, let me see position 5 here. Oh, actually position 5 is where everything should go back. So we have position 1, which is 0, 0. Okay, so this kind of buffered in a weird way. So everything's offset. So let me delete position 1. So position 2 is 0, 0. Position 3 is like that. So it mirrored it for some reason, but that's fine. Yeah, it's more for the simple animations. The more heavy-duty animations or more specific, you just go straight into motion study. But yeah, position 5. So let me add an additional one. Position 6, where this returns to 0, and this to 360. Let me just say update position just in case. So position 4, position 5, position 6. There we go. So let's try recalculating that. There we go. That looks pretty good actually. So what I'll do is that it's way too slow. So I'll change the time spent in each position from 2 seconds to 1/4 of a second. So 0.25. Oops. I can advance with tab. 0.25. 0.25, so 1 second. So if I recalculate, there we go. It's a lot faster now. So from here, you can actually save out the animation. So if I go to here, Solidworks 2019 is great because it actually added the MP4 as a savable video, which is why I'm doing this in 2019. But before I do that, I'm just going to hit cancel and show you how to import this into a motion study just in case you want to play around with it further. So I'll hit OK, and you'll see that the make controller is down here. It's pretty cool because you can right click on it and tell it to go to a specific position. Hit OK. So, you know, if you're working on a mechanism, you need to go to a certain position. You can use make controller to make that a lot simpler. But if I go into my motion study, I can actually import the make controller in here and play around with the keyframes. And now I'll go to this little camera with the magic wand, the animation wizard, and say that we want to bring in a make controller. We just have the 1, and I'll just leave it on key points. We'll start it at 0 seconds, and there it is. Yep, there's our parrot. We have this in repeat mode, so we actually can see him bobbing. But here is where we can actually set more advanced settings, you know, such as the position or the frame rate and stuff like that. So if I want to switch the position around a little bit, like that, I can do that. And right click this key where it says orientation and camera views, replace key, recalculate. There we go. If you want to increase the frame rate, go to the gear, and 8 frames a second is pretty abysmal, but you know, that's for like draft quality purposes. I can bump that all the way to 60 if I want to, or I think you can go all the way to 120 actually, but you know, 60 is mostly enough for my purposes. Ooh, look at that smooth little bop. Alright, and now how do we save this? So we can go over here to where it says save animation. You can put this on a specific aspect ratio. So if I do 16:9, I might have to move it over a little bit actually. So let me do that. So if I undo that, if I hold Control and middle click, you can pan like that. Orientation in camera, replace key, recalculate. Okay. So I'll go to save 16:9. Yep, now he's in the middle. Frames per second. I don't have to enter it twice, but you do. Enter 60 and change. AVI files always come out terrible in my opinion. So I'm going to change that to MP4. So I'll just hit save. And it's going to start assembling those into a video. So once that finishes, I'll just show it here real quick. Okay, that finished. That was relatively quick. And so I'll show you the video here. So I'll actually put it in view. And that came out real smooth. The blackout that you see is actually VLC restarting. But that is really nice. But you may be asking, so, you know, that's cool and all, but what can you do with such a technique like this? Well, I'll tell you what you can do. So, if I go here, I can go to my beach ball and set my scene. So this is where I can set my background image or put it in an environment. But what I'll do is I'll say edit scene. And instead of being an image, I'll just say be a color. And instead of being white, maybe be green. See where I'm going with this? Can turn off the edges if I wish. And I believe you don't need to redo the key. So there you go. You have a parrot that is dancing on what is effectively a green screen. Alright, and there you have it. So you might be wondering what you could possibly do with a parrot that is dancing in front of a green screen. I can think of a couple of things.